for those who can't. Thanks everyone for being here for the Iowa Hunger Coalition's April 2024 monthly meetup. My name is Luke Elzinga. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at the DMARC Food Pantry Network in Des Moines, and I also serve as the board chair of the Iowa Hunger Coalition. If you haven't already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We're just sharing our name, organization, where we're joining from, and our favorite thing about spring. So we've got a few things we're going to cover today, but I always like to start with just some basic info about the Hunger Coalition. If you're not familiar, we are a membership-based 501c4 organization. We are explicitly an advocacy organization. We don't do any sort of direct service, but our board and our members are really those boots on the ground direct service organizations. We have a volunteer board of directors, no paid staff members. We do have a contract lobbyist through Peterson Consulting with John and Cindy Peterson. And we really try to be that voice at the Capitol, the statewide voice for trying to eliminate food insecurity and build equitable food systems in our state. So shout out to our members. We would not be able to do the work we do without our members. We have individual and organizational members. And really we don't want finances to be a barrier for joining. So we do have kind of a sliding scale, suggested contributions, but it's really give what you can. So I'm going to start with a quick federal farm bill update before we get into some other things. As a reminder, Congress was supposed to pass a farm bill in 2023. They did pass a one-year extension. So that is currently through September 30, 2024. And based on what I've heard and what others have shared, I think it's highly likely that we'll see a short-term extension of the Farm Bill to push it past the election. I think there's not a lot of time before then to get something done, and both parties, are hoping that they will be in a better negotiating position after the election to have their priorities included. So I think it's likely we'll see it push beyond the election. But have heard some word that House Republicans are planning to mark up kind of a farm bill with their priorities. And so this would likely be a partisan bill, not a bipartisan bill. And they're hoping to do that before Memorial Day, meaning it's pretty likely in the coming month that we will see some news about this and some proposals coming out. We don't exactly know what all of those will be, but we do have some indications. So the House Republican Study Committee, which is the largest Republican caucus in the U.S. House, their budget includes some really concerning proposals related to SNAP. Things like turning it into a block grant. They actually want to remove it from the Farm Bill and have ag programs separate from the nutrition programs, requiring photo ID, consenting to home visits, just some really absurd proposals. And 3 of our 4 representatives in Iowa are members of that Republican Study Committee. Representatives Nunn, Hinson, and Feenstra. Miller Meeks is not a member of the Republican Study Committee. And that doesn't mean that those individual legislators believe all those things or support those proposals. It just means they're part of this committee that has those in their budget proposals. One thing that's highly likely we will see is a focus on the Thrifty Food Plan. This is the USDA food plan that calculates SNAP benefits. And this is getting a little into the weeds. We'll probably save this for next month to delve more into the weeds. But back in the 2018 Farm Bill, there was something language that modernized the Thrifty Food Plan, which led to the first permanent increase to SNAP benefits that we've seen in like 40 years. It sounds like there will be an effort, probably not to undo that increase, but to prevent any future increases that are slated to happen every 5 years from taking effect. So we're getting some data together about the impact of that thrifty food plan increase and expect to hear more from us in the coming month on that as well. I'm going to see if Giselle Bruskowitz is here from Iowa Valley RC&D. I know she had to step out for a second.
I'm here.
Here she is.
I'm present.
Um, Giselle, do you want to? Sorry, I didn't have any slides or anything for you. But do you want to just give an update on where things stand with the LFS and LFPA funding?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And if any of my colleagues at Iowa Valley RC&D are on, namely Casey and Sophie, if you want to chime in at all, you're welcome to help me out here. But yeah, so I'm gonna, can I share screen? Yeah, it
You
looks
can.
like I can. Um, so I want to just share the website because I know many folks on this call are familiar with these programs, but some people might not be as familiar. So, um, always love to share the website just as a little context for people. So the Iowa LFPA is the Iowa Local Food Purchase Assistance Program. We are we just began phase 3. So we're sort of in the third year of this project here in Iowa. Um, if you want to learn more about it, you can definitely visit the website. Encourage you to do that. There's a page for producers, for food access organizations. So that's like the pantries, backpack programs, community fridges, anywhere that food is going out to people who need and want it in our communities. And on this food access page, you can kind of see this map. So all of the funding for food dollars gets distributed out through our distributors, who are food hubs, food banks, and Meskwaki Nation. So at this stage in the program, it was $5.6 million package total over 3 years. And we just allocated that phase 3 budget through these entities who submitted work plans. So at this point, all of the money has been allocated for the program. There's over $4 million that has gone out to subsidize local food purchases that get distributed to Iowans for free. So the way the program's structured is these entities like work with their community partners. So, Iowa Food Hub up in the northeast part, and the blue area here is Northeast Iowa Food Bank. They're working with farmers in their area. They're working with food access partners in their area to figure out how they're going to source the food and where it's going to get distributed. So they get a dollar amount budget from the grant that we allocate as an admin team. We have committees. We have 4 different committees that help with that process. And then that money gets allocated out. So they might meet with Farmer A and say, hey, we really want to buy 2 head of beef from you this year. So that's going to equal this many dollars. They might meet with pantries A, B, and C and say, hey, we want to allocate $3,000 to you this year. So I think a lot of the entities have been working in partnership for years with these folks, and it's at their discretion to kind of figure out how can this money best meet the needs, both for the farmers and for people who are looking for food and need access to food in their communities. So it's really a decentralized approach. And they have their budgets. They know how much they have to spend this year. So I wouldn't I can't say in good faith, like, if you want to join this program, it's not too late. Because it's possible that the money's been promised to a farmer or it's already been promised to a pantry through these distributors. However, it doesn't hurt to reach out. So, the food dollars, it's going to be over $1 million. Casey, do you know the exact dollar figure that we sent out for phase 3?
I don't,
She might
sorry.
not be. That's okay. It's over $1 million for this next year that's going out throughout the state. Um, on the, so I'm happy to take questions at the end, but I just wanted to give a sense, and I'm a visual learner, so wanted to give a sense of like where the money got distributed and who the people to reach out. And if you go on this website too, you can click here and there's contact info for all of those distributors. For the local food for schools, this is a similar program, sister program we call it, because it invests the federal funding from the government, which is $2.2 million. And 100% of that money goes to food. So this pays the farmer, like the LFPA pays the farmer a fair price, and then gets that money to school districts for free. So again, investing in our local producers and then getting food out to people who want to access that food free of charge. So originally this program was slotted for just 2 phases. And you can see here on the website all the counties and served in the last phase. Really nice distribution across the state. And if you want to learn more about the program and where some of the dollars went and some of the lessons learned, some reports, there's a report from the first year of the program. Can you still hear me okay? Okay, just had internet connection unstable. And then there's there's a really nice report that just came out last week about loans from the districts. Um, we were hoping to spend all of the funding, but there was actually a bit left over from the first couple phases. Not all of the schools completely spent down their awards. So, and then we had a little bit tucked away for a processing pilot that we're not going to use all of. So there's, I believe, a little over $300,000 that we are about to redistribute out for a third phase, which will take place this fall. So this fall semester for the schools, we are reviewing the school applications right now in committee, and there'll be another round where schools applied for a smaller award for this fall. It's $2,500 to $3,000. And we had 122 school districts apply. So we're gonna make sure that we reallocate the rest of that funding to make sure for both of these programs, we want these dollars to go in the state. We want them to go to local producers. We want them to provide food for Iowans that we know need this food. So our biggest goal is really to make sure we spend all the funds down and we don't have to send it back to the USDA. So that's where we're at right now. We're looking really square. Like on paper, we are spending down to zero. And so we're going to keep on working with our partners to make sure that collectively over $8 million with these two projects get spent down basically by the end of this calendar year.
Thank you,
And
Giselle. That
I'm happy to take questions. I know it's a lot of information. I know I'm not like giving you like we have 1,252,094 cents kind of figures, but I hope it's a general sense of where we're at with budget.
yeah, thank you, Giselle, for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions?
I had put one in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and repeat it. So for all the different like farm bill scenarios that might happen that Luke was talking about, do any of those pose a risk to LFPA, LFS being able to finish out as planned? Or are they kind of protected since they're funded more through the American Rescue Plan Act? I think. Maybe that's wrong, but
Luke, do you know the answer to that?
Do
My,
not. I
okay.
think it's the latter. I think it's through ARPA funds, so it would not really be. I mean, I think the farm bill conversations are probably more around can we get continued funding for these programs beyond what's already been allocated. But I don't think there would be anything that would cut these funds short.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that, and I haven't heard any word about that. I think the Farm Bill could potentially pose a threat to future funding. Um, but I also know we have advocates in Washington, D.C. through NSAC, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, has been doing a lot of lobbying on our behalf and actually asked us to do a fly-in to DC within the next month to kind of start to do this final push as they're looking at the Farm Bill. There have been various proposals in DC to continue these programs both within the Farm Bill and outside of the Farm Bill. Um, and the way that they're looking at slating the funding is like under miscellaneous. So I don't think it's like getting looped into any of the programs that we would be really familiar with. But I'm not worried. I don't have any fears that they're gonna take this money back. It's in contract. The money is there, but I think it's more a fear of like, wow, what a successful set of programs that we've proven the impact on. We should keep investing in these. And my fear is that they aren't gonna see the value in that and aren't going to write it into the legislation to continue the programs because these weren't written in the Farm Bill in the past. These monies came in basically post-COVID through various streams. So
Thank you, Giselle. Any other questions? All right, well, I am going to hop into some legislative updates.
thank you, Luke, for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thank you again for sharing. And if you have any questions about LFS, LFPA, reach out to Giselle or I'm assuming anyone else on the team at Iowa Valley RC&D. All right, well, I'm going to start with the bad news. Um, the basic income ban that we had been following did pass the Senate yesterday and is heading to the governor's desk for signature. It had been stalled in the Senate for a number of weeks. We were feeling hopeful that the clock would kind of run out of time on this, but they did take this up yesterday and pass this. So this would prohibit cities and counties from administering basic or guaranteed income programs, including pilot studies. Uplift, which is the Central Iowa Basic Income Pilot, is the only program currently operating. I do think the way this is written, Uplift will be allowed to complete their pilot and study, but this will prevent any city or county funding going toward basic income pilots in the future. You can go back and watch the floor debate on this if you want. I'm not sure I would recommend it. But I think we really saw just kind of an insight into some legislators' ideas around poverty. There were some quotes around that, back in the day, it was nonprofits who address these issues. Now it's just people relying on the government. I think we all know that we're seeing more and more people turning to private charities and food pantries and less people enrolled in SNAP and other programs. Um, there was this idea that LBJ's Great Society is proof that anti-poverty programs don't work, even though since they were enacted, we've seen those programs just chipped away over decades, to the point where they are not as effective as they used to be. But I think it provides a good insight into kind of where certain legislators are coming from and the kind of messaging that we need to counter as anti-hunger and broader anti-poverty advocates. Because I think it's clear that some of our legislators, a lot of our legislators live in a bubble. They don't, if they have firsthand experience with poverty, it was maybe as a child and you know I think that's probably more than most legislators have in terms of firsthand experience. Um, and I don't think they interact with, low income people living in poverty on a day-to-day basis. So I think clearly we've got our work cut out for us and just how we reframe the narrative on poverty and food insecurity. I wanted to mention this. We didn't put anything out about this as the Hunger Coalition, but I did get some people reaching out about it. There was this mislabeling bill around meat and egg substitutes, Senate File 2391. It did pass the House and Senate. I'm assuming the governor will sign it. It basically creates punishments for meat and egg alternative products that don't clearly label their product as such, which I don't know if this is a huge issue. I feel like most meat and egg alternatives pretty clearly label and market themselves as such. But I won't dig into all the language, but basically, if they weren't clearly labeled as meat and egg substitutes, they'd be banned from sale by food processing plants and banned from purchase by a lot of state entities. There was also this piece that got added on in the House, which was just very unexpected, and kind of caught us off guard. But mislabeled egg substitute products would also be banned from SNAP and WIC. Two things on this. You already can't purchase egg substitutes with WIC benefits. Basically, if you have an egg allergy and receive WIC, my understanding is that you can swap that out for a can of beans or a can of tuna or some other protein source that is WIC approved. But you can't use WIC to purchase like an egg-free substitute. And as it relates to SNAP, it is just extremely unlikely that USDA would grant this waiver to restrict those purchases. So I guess I just wanted to bring this up in case you see any news about it. Just know, I think it's again highly unlikely that this will actually have an impact. I think this is just very clearly a pro-industry, pro-corporate bill, and is seen as kind of protecting those from these, I guess, attacks on the meat industry. I don't know. I didn't write the bill. But yes, this did pass the House and Senate and is awaiting signature. I don't think ultimately it's something for us as advocates to be too concerned about, though. But again, it's an opportunity to talk about the importance of choice in SNAP, and allowing folks to make the best decisions for their households. And then, we are not officially adjourned with the session yet, but we are getting close. They'll probably wrap up this weekend or early next week. And we have not seen action on a number of issues. And I think it's highly unlikely that we would see action on these issues at this point. Nothing on double up food bucks. That was House File 2022, had 3 House Republicans as sponsors. Ultimately, it was not included in the HHS budget. Healthy school meals for all. We had a couple bills, House File 575, which was sponsored by Representative Sammy Sheets, who is a Democrat from Cedar Rapids, along with 20 House Republicans. That would have expanded free school meals to all students who qualify for reduced price meals. That also was not included in the education budget. We know that basically the person who stopped that was the education chair, who said they were not interested in doing this. Very late, kind of right before the filing deadline, there was a healthy universal school lunch bill, House File 2369, that was sponsored by Matthew Rinker, who is a Republican in the Burlington area. Never really had a chance because it like dropped 2 days before the first funnel, but gives us an opportunity for next year to do some kind of engagement around that. The Grocery Investment Fund, House File 2599. This was spearheaded by Republican Brian Losey, who's a Republican in the Bondurant area. Center for Rural Affairs was really working on that. It had some good movement early on in the House, but then kind of stalled out and was not included in a budget bill. And then obviously summer EBT. We did not see any action on summer EBT. I want to note these top 3 priorities. These were all bills that had Republican sponsors. we've been very intentional about pursuing bipartisan policies that we can get members of both parties to support. But ultimately, none of those advanced. Summer EBT, I think we also do not think this should be a partisan issue. Um, we couldn't get any Republicans signed on to this. And really, I think the biggest barrier there was the governor's statement and reasons for why Iowa would not participate. That was the biggest hurdle in getting Republican support. So that's the bad stuff. We got a few small wins. We did help stop some bad legislation, including a bill that would further criminalize homelessness. That was kind of backed by the Cicero Institute. And then House File 2112, which would have basically created some redundant pieces in the application process for eligible non-citizens to access SNAP. And really, I think was just a harmful messaging bill that around immigration. And we know that undocumented immigrants already are not eligible for SNAP. And this just, I think, leads to further fear in the immigrant community about accessing public assistance programs. But it was good that we did not see that. There is one thing still in play that we're following. The Choose Iowa Food Purchasing Pilot Project. A little bit of background here. There were a couple groups kind of pursuing funding. The Iowa Food Bank Association had the Iowans Feeding Iowans Act, which would have been $5 million for food purchases by the 6 food banks in the state, with some local pieces there. The Iowa Food System Coalition was working on the Local Food Procurement Act, which would have been additional dollars to support the LFS and LFPA programs that you just heard Giselle share about, to continue building on the success of those, knowing that it's a bit of a question mark at the federal level whether those funds will continue. Ultimately, what we got, I don't think was anywhere near both of those in terms of the dollar amount. So this is currently in the House Ag budget, which there was just a number that came out this morning, House File 2694. You can look that up on the legislator's site. I'll also try to drop it in the chat in a second. It's currently not included in the Senate or governor's budget, but it designates $100,000 in funds to schools and school districts and $150,000 in funds to food banks and emergency feeding organizations for a 1-to-1 match in purchasing meat, dairy, eggs, and produce from Choose Iowa vendors. For schools, there's an exclusion of milk under dairy, I think because of a separate program that already exists there. Would be administered by IDOLs. And those purchases can only be made from a Choose Iowa vendor who's already participating, or a food or a farm or food business that has applied and is expected to be granted the Choose Iowa brand. I think the big piece here is, it's $100,000 in funds to schools and school districts. Each school or school district has $1,000 cap, which we know that money, based on what we've seen with some other food purchasing programs, I'm sure will vanish in an instant. And that $1,000 cap, especially at the district level, is just like such a small amount. The funds to food banks and emergency feeding organizations have a $25,000 cap per entity. But again, we know those funds are likely to go very quickly. So right now where this stands, it's in the House budget, not in the Senate or governor's budget. What we've kind of heard is to kind of hold off on advocacy right now in the Senate. And as they're negotiating, but just know that we may activate you all at some point to reach out to legislators and the governor's office on this. So just be prepared, I guess. I would also encourage you all to take a look at that language in the House Ag budget, and any feedback you can provide to us. Feel free to reach out, because I think, you know, like I said, I don't think it does a lot of the things we would like, but it is something. It is a baby step, I guess. But would love to hear feedback from different groups on, what positives you see and also what some limitations might be around that purchasing pilot project. We don't have any information about what sort of application or anything would be involved in this. Again, this is still up in the air. Even if the Senate includes it, it could get vetoed by the governor. So it's still in play, I guess is how I'll phrase it. Yeah, Giselle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for this update, and thank you for being our eyes and ears on the ground to track this stuff, Luke. Um, I think like with the two bills that you mentioned that were proposed this legislative session, there was the Iowa Food System Coalition bill that I believe was the budget proposal was around 2 million. And then the Feeding America, the Iowa Food Bank Association one was for 2.5 million, and they proposed a match, or was theirs 5 million?
It was for 5.
5. So we asked for 7 with the two combined. And then it looks like that 7 got whittled down to 250,000 combined, which is unfortunate. And I
That's a
think
word.
but okay, silver lining is that there's something written in. So I think we have to celebrate that win, that it made it this far and there is something written in. I think we have to keep pushing every year, that we have to keep proving the point that the return on investment in these programs is worth it. And we have to allocate more than just breadcrumbs to feeding people and investing in our growers. um, but there's positive, and I think it like the fact that there's something in here is a win. So I'm trying to remind myself this is a long fight and we have to just keep showing up every year. um I feel like I was gonna say something else hopeful, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, thank you again, Luke, for keeping track on this and keeping us mobilized.
Giselle, this is Cindy, and yes, you're correct. The fact that we got anything at all, especially when they're first time asks, are pretty amazing because usually you have to plant the seed and then you wait a year or two before you get everybody on board. I know with the one-to-one match from the food banks, that will be accessible as of July 1st, and by July 3rd, it'll be spent. And so by the time that report comes out, hopefully that they will see that the need is there and how quickly that money was absorbed into the system. So whether anyone's going to pay that much attention to the dates, but it will go fast. And, you know, as Representative Momsen said, he said, well, at least we've got a little bit in there. So we have a little bit of a track record to show, the desire and the need and how fast. And I think coming also from the producers and growers and stuff that the food banks will be working with, getting them on a positive note too, to perhaps help lobby a little bit for something like this will be a benefit to us all. But yes, it's hard to be grateful when you get little breadcrumbs when the need is so huge. But
Yeah. Yep. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is this Choose Iowa piece of it is really interesting because I come from local food world. So I think we'll have to continue to like be pressing on and working and collaborating with, is how I should say, like being good partners with the Department of Agriculture and making sure that we get all those producers that are local registered in that system.
yep,
And that we have clear definitions around, the local producers so that we can get the money out to them, even if it's breadcrumbs, like $250,000, if for some producers there's one in Cedar first-year producer. She's growing on an acre to she got $5,000 or $10,000 through the LFPA, and that was very transformative for her business.
Yes.
So from the farmer perspective, this money can be quite
Yep.
impactful.
Yep. Yep. And hopefully with this, and by attaching it to this Choose Iowa program was great because the legislature put 500,000 into it last year and, setting up, and it basically was a promotional piece, but setting them all up. And, we coming in there offering to be their best clients, by buying directly from them was a win-win. And that's what we were trying to prove to them. But they still gave us breadcrumbs. But if we can get those local producers to help us next year, lobby and say, hey, this is a great program. It really boosted me, my operation. That will be helpful, I think, to improve that number next year.
Giselle, I think you bring up a really good point. If we do see this passed and signed into law, I think, we'll try to plan on something, and maybe we can even partner with Iowa Valley or Food Hub Managers Working Group. There's not like the tier systems written in to the law. That doesn't mean we can't be educating food banks, food pantries, schools about kind of working with local producers and encouraging those producers who have already participated in LFS and LFPA to apply for Choose Iowa so that they could have access to these funds. I think that would also really help make the case with the department that this program specifically brought in more producers to the Choose Iowa brand.
Yep.
So while I would have liked something closer to like those tiers, I can see why the department would really like this approach. Any other questions on this? All right. Speaking of breadcrumbs, no, I'm sorry. The summer meal program expansion grant that was announced last week. Let's talk about it. So a week ago, last Wednesday, the state announced a new summer meal program expansion grant. This is a $900,000 grant program that provides funding to support new and returning summer meal sites. The funding period does go through August 2026. So my read on that is if they don't spend all the funds this summer, there might be another round next summer or the following. If they do spend them all, that's probably all we see. The deadline to submit questions was yesterday, and answers will be posted on Monday through the the Iowa Grants website. The deadline to apply for this expansion grant is May 7th, but groups must also have applied to be a summer meal site by May 1st. There's a little bit of wiggle room there that the sites who apply after that May 1st deadline may still be able to participate, but they can't start those summer meal sites until they've been granted approval through the state and USDA. So there's some program requirements for the host sites. A lot of these are the same as the summer food service program and seamless summer option, which are kind of the two USDA programs around summer meals. Schools and nonprofit organizations can serve as host sites, whether they're new or returning. The qualifications for the grant are the same. The site qualifications are the same as they are for the summer food service program. This was something we had kind of hoped that this expansion grant might maybe lower the threshold for the number of students per area or something there to bring in more students, but they are the same. So for this expansion grant, the meal site needs to be located in areas that have at least 50% free or reduced price students in that area. So that can either be like a school building or it can be a census tract. There's some other ways that you can look at it too, but it just is defined as that area. The sponsor sites can operate as open, meaning you provide meals to anyone who shows up, any kid who shows up, or they can be closed enrolled or campsites. So closed enrolled are places like maybe a Boys and Girls Club has a program where the students need to apply for it. It's not just anyone can come off the street on any given day and participate. There is a requirement that sites must charge for adult meals. And there is an option for sites to operate non-congregate sites, meaning more grab and go model sites. They have to be in rural areas that are otherwise underserved, meaning that there can't be a congregate meal site there for them to operate a non-congregate site. Supposedly. I have some questions there because there are some sites that operate a congregate and a non-congregate meal site, and I'm not exactly sure how they do that. If anyone has any details on that they want to share, feel free. So what the funding looks like for site sponsors, meaning schools or nonprofits that did not operate a meal site in 2023, they can get $10,000 for each new open site, meaning open to anyone, and $5,000 for each additional open site with an estimated maximum of 4 new sites per sponsor based on available funding. If they're operating closed enrolled sites, that's $2,500 per site with a maximum of 2 new sites per sponsor. For sites who did operate a meal site in 2023, they can access 10,000 for each new open site and 5,000 for each additional beyond that first open site with an estimated maximum of 3 new sites per sponsor. So the allowable expenses for the grant include, this is a list, this was just taken directly from the grant portal. Food items needed for enhanced meal quality, including locally grown or locally raised food. I think this piece is really interesting. It can't be meal reimbursement that's already being reimbursed through summer food service program. But if the food expenses are related to purchasing more local food, it sounds like they can. So there's some things around program equipment, program outreach, operational or admin expenses, professional development, point of service software, food containers for transporting food, staff retention payments, rental vehicles, and transportation costs. So again, it's not the actual food that's being served there. That's already being reimbursed through the other program. It's kind of these ancillary expenses around promotion and administering the summer meal sites. So our take on this, we've been expecting this since the December announcement that Iowa was not going to participate in summer EBT. They made some indications in that announcement that there was going to be something to expand summer meal programs. I think there are some good elements of the grant, especially that local food purchasing piece. Some criticisms. It has an extremely tight turnaround. We kept waiting for when they were going to announce it. I kind of thought they would do it at least before the month of April started. I mean, folks already have less than a month to get this application in. And it also doesn't address some of the existing barriers for summer meal sites, both for those host sites and whether it makes financial sense for them if they're even going to have areas that qualify, and for the kids who benefit. I mean, this does nothing to address transportation issues for kids other than hopefully increasing the proximity of a site through opening new sites. But doesn't address some of those larger barriers that prevent kids from being able to access these meal sites. Ultimately, we believe that Iowans need summer EBT. We don't think it's an either or, we think it's both. And we're talking about 29 million on an annual basis through summer EBT versus 900,000 over the course of 3 years. And similar to our asks around food purchasing dollars at the state legislature, the comparison is, I mean, it's just such a small, we're talking about 3% of what we could have accessed in federal funds. going directly to households to support food purchases. I've looked through, so you can look at the USDA kind of meal mapper to see eligible areas. I mean, for instance, Adams County, and kind of Southwest Iowa, they don't have a single school or census tract that would qualify for a summer meal site, meaning they're again not going to be able to even have the option of having one unless it's fully privately funded. And there's 147 kids in that county who would have received summer EBT benefits. Um, I think ultimately we'll see how many new sites come on as a result of this grant. Um, but I thought we could maybe just open up for discussion. What's your take on the summer meal expansion grant? Especially would love to hear from communities who have operated these in the past or are looking at potentially applying for this grant. What do you see as positives and what do you see potentially as barriers?
Yeah, I can chime in here. Caitlin Charman, Waukee Schools, and we do operate a summer meals program. Last year we had 5 sites. This year we will have 4 returning sites, and we are adding 2 new sites. We do plan to take advantage of the grant as well, but yeah, I think like you said, Luke, it's something, but it's not quite enough. We know it's not going to get every single kid that qualifies for free and reduced meals to our summer meal sites. So, yes, while it's helpful, it's definitely not enough.
Caitlin, can I ask a follow-up question? I know there was, and I don't know where the funding came from, but there's been some support for local food purchases during the summer before. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there is the Farm to Summer campaign, which usually, like in the last couple of years, has been like $200 to purchase local foods during the summer, which isn't a whole lot, but for us, like we do a lot lower volume of meals in the summer, so it does go a little bit further than like, I mean, $200 in the school year would be like, well, that was enough for one school building to buy like 2 cases of apple. No, just kidding. But yeah, definitely goes a little bit further in the summer months for us. And I got an email because we applied for it again this year, and they apparently got a lot of applicants this year. And so, I don't know what their funding looks like and how they're going to have to spread it out, but yeah, that'll be kind of interesting to see if we still get $200 or is it going to be like 150 so they can spread the love a little further. So I'll be curious to see how that goes.
Is that through the state? Is that through USDA?
I don't know the funding source. I know the application usually comes from Chelsea Christ at ISU F Ed.
Okay. So I almost wonder if it's a private. That makes sense.
I don't know, yeah, if it's just part of like, land grant university funding that they have a pot of money that they get to use for that initiative.
Yeah. Good to know. Any other thoughts on this? What positives do you see? What questions do you still have?
I guess I have one other thought I can add on to. For us in Waukee, we are a lower free and reduced district, so the 50% requirement for sites really hinders where we can serve. We have to go to specific apartment complexes. We did have a new census tract that finally opened up this year, so that's one of our new sites is in that eligible census block. But yeah, it really, it's like, well, it's great that we can get the grant money, but you still have to serve at those sites where you see the highest need. And you can't really go to like parks or libraries or those places where kids naturally are during the summer to be able to get the participation of those students.
you, Caitlin. Anyone else? And I would encourage if you are in a county that does not have a summer meal site, um, I would encourage you to reach out to, your school district, any organizations that might be interested in operating one. I mean, I do think it obviously is a good thing to have more summer meal sites across the state. Um, I also think we need summer EBT, but I would encourage you to apply. And if there's things that are preventing you from applying, or like that there's not really an area eligible, let us know. Because we're going to be really interested to see when they announce these grants. Um, my read on it is I could see it more going to expanding new sites with places that already had some existing sites and less more sites who had never participated coming on. I hope I'm not right. Um, any other thoughts? Otherwise, we can wrap up about 7 minutes early today. Anyone have any exciting news or announcements they want to share from their organization?
Uh, Now, I would say, please use our online resources about food banks in Iowa. We try to keep them very up to date and use that
Yeah,
part.
feel free to share the link in the chat again. I know you did last month, but feel free to post that again.
Offshoot are some of your manual efforts to that work. Give some time, effort, better outreach.
Any other questions? All right, well, we will send out the recording of this. Feel free to always reach out, iowahungercoalition@gmail.com. And I'm assuming we'll probably talk next month more about Farm Bill and what's happening there. So thank you all. Thanks for all you do. See
Thank
ya.
you, Luke.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Luke.
Luke.